The chandeliers at Chateau Noir cast amber light across white tablecloths, the kind of glow that made Friday nights feel expensive. 8:15 on a November evening, and the dining room hummed with the sound of success. Executives celebrating quarterly wins, couples dressed for anniversaries they'd planned months in advance, voices kept low beneath the drift of a piano playing something smooth and forgettable. The restaurant occupied the ground floor of a glass tower in downtown Chicago, floor-to-ceiling windows offering views of the city lights beginning to flicker on as darkness settled over Lake Michigan. Victoria Cross sat at table 14 in the far corner, same as always. She'd arrived at exactly 8 o'clock, handed her coat to the hostess without making eye contact, and walked to her usual spot with the kind of purposeful stride that suggested she'd calculated the most efficient path years ago and saw no reason to deviate. Her black suit probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Hair pulled back tight, no jewelry except a Patek Philippe that caught the light when she moved her wrist. She was 38 but carried herself like someone who'd learned early that showing fatigue was a luxury she couldn't afford. Marcus Reed had served her maybe 40 times over the past 2 years. He knew her order before she opened her mouth. Sparkling water, no ice, the arugula salad with grilled salmon, dressing on the side. She never ordered wine, never touched dessert. She'd eat methodically while working on the iPad propped against the small vase of white orchids, her expression suggesting whatever she was reading had disappointed her in some fundamental way. He brought the sparkling water without being asked, set it down with the practiced quiet of someone who'd learned to be invisible. She glanced up for half a second, gave the smallest nod, and returned to her screen. That was the extent of their interaction, same as it had been for 2 years. She tipped 25% in cash, left without saying goodbye, and he appreciated the efficiency of it. Some customers wanted therapy sessions or thought waiters existed for flirting practice. Victoria Cross treated the transaction like business, which was the most respectful thing she could do. Marcus moved back toward the service station near the kitchen doors, checking his phone when he thought the manager wasn't watching. A text from Sophie glowed on the screen, a photo of a stick figure drawing, 3 people holding hands under a yellow sun, the words, "I love you, Dad," written in careful 7-year-old handwriting. His chest tightened the way it always did when she reminded him she was waiting at home. He typed back quickly, "I'll be home by 11:30. Kiddo, love you more than the whole sky." The front door opened, pulling his attention the way doors always did. Part of being a good waiter was tracking arrivals, anticipating who'd need menus, who'd head straight for the bar. 4 men stepped inside, and something in Marcus's body went still before his conscious mind caught up. They weren't dressed for Chateau Noir. Jeans and work jackets, one of them wearing a Carhartt coat with paint stains on the sleeves, boots that had seen real labor. The hostess approached with her professional smile, but they weren't looking at her. Their eyes scanned the dining room with the kind of focused intensity that separated people looking for a table from people looking for a target. The tallest one, graying hair and a jaw that looked like it had taken a few punches over the years, spotted Victoria's table. His expression shifted into something cold and sharp, the kind of look that came right before violence. Marcus felt the old instinct crawl up his spine, the same alert he used to get on patrol when a routine call was about to turn into something that ended with someone bleeding. He'd spent 3 years trying to bury that instinct, telling himself he'd walked away from situations where split-second judgments mattered. Apparently, his body hadn't gotten the message. The 4 men moved past the hostess without waiting to be seated. Chairs scraped loudly against the floor as they took a table near Victoria's, facing her direction. Other diners glanced over with mild irritation before returning to their conversations. The 4 men didn't open their menus. They just sat there, 3 of them staring at Victoria while one, younger, maybe early 30s, kept his eyes down, hands fidgeting with the salt shaker. Marcus grabbed a water pitcher and moved closer, using the excuse of refilling glasses at a nearby table. His movement stayed casual, but he positioned himself where he could hear fragments of their conversation. The tall one with gray hair spoke first, his voice carrying an edge that could cut glass. "That's her. Park Ventures became Crosspoint Ventures 5 years back, but that's the CEO, Victoria Cross." The younger one looked up, nervous energy radiating from him like heat. "You sure we should do this? We could get arrested. We let her know." The third man, built like someone who'd spent 30 years lifting heavy things, leaned forward. We let her see what her decisions cost. She needs to look us in the eye. Marcus's grip tightened on the water pitcher. He looked at Victoria, still focused on her iPad, completely unaware. The soft lighting made her look almost fragile despite the severity of her expression, like someone who'd built walls so high she'd forgotten what it felt like to be seen. He needed to think. These men weren't here for dinner. Their collective tension felt like the moment before a storm broke, when the air got heavy and everyone held their breath. But what could he do? Call Paul Romano, the manager? Get them kicked out based on a feeling? They hadn't done anything yet. Maybe they just wanted to talk. Except Marcus had seen this before. The stillness before someone made a move they couldn't take back. The way angry men gathered courage from each other until the first one acted and the rest followed. The tall one turned his head and his eyes locked onto Marcus. 2 seconds of direct contact, and something flickered across the man's face. Recognition. Marcus's heart rate climbed. He looked away, moved back toward the kitchen, mind racing through possibilities he didn't want to consider. He remembered them now. A bar fight at Mickey's Tavern on the south side had to be 6 years ago. Marcus had been first on scene as a patrol officer, broke it up before anyone got seriously hurt. All 4 arrested, spent a night in jail, paid fines. Nothing major in the grand scheme of things. But the tall one had looked at Marcus during booking and said something that stuck. "I don't forget faces, Officer Reed, never forget." Marcus forced himself to breathe normally. Maybe the guy didn't recognize him. Different hair now, the beard he'd grown to look less like the clean-shaven cop he used to be. 30 pounds heavier from 3 years of restaurant food and not enough sleep. But even if the recognition landed, this wasn't about Marcus. This was about Victoria Cross and whatever she'd done to put that kind of cold fury in 4 men's eyes. The younger one stood up, nervous energy finally converting to action. He started walking toward Victoria's table, and Marcus's body moved before his mind finished processing options. He cut across the dining room, intercepting the man 3 steps before he reached her, positioning himself directly in the path. "Can I help you with something?" Marcus kept his voice light, professional, but his stance said something different. Feet planted, weight balanced, ready. The man stopped. Up close, Marcus could see the desperation carved into his face. The kind that came from too many nights lying awake doing math that wouldn't work no matter how many times you ran the numbers. "I need to talk to her. If you'd like to speak with another guest, I can pass along a message." Marcus didn't move aside. "Just get out of my way." The words came out cracked, more plea than threat. Victoria looked up from her iPad, finally noticing the confrontation developing 3 feet from her table. Confusion crossed her face, followed by something more guarded. The tall one with gray hair stood up. So did the other 2. Marcus felt the situation crystallizing into something he couldn't walk away from. 4 against 1, a room full of people who'd come here expecting safety, a woman who had no idea she was in danger. His training said to de-escalate, create distance, call for backup. But there was no backup here. Just him, a water pitcher still in his hand, and 3 years of rust on skills he'd tried to forget. The tall one walked over, and recognition settled fully into place on his face. "Wait, I know you." Marcus met his eyes. There was no point in lying now. "You should go back to your table. You're that cop." The man's voice rose slightly, drawing attention from nearby tables. "Daniel Cole." "No, wait. Marcus. Marcus Reed. You arrested us at Rosie's bar 5 years ago." The other men looked at Marcus with new attention, recalculating. Small world. "You're a waiter now? What happened? They fire you?" Marcus didn't respond. He could feel Victoria's gaze on him, her sharp mind processing new information, trying to understand what kind of waiter used to be a cop. "I asked you a question." The man's voice hardened, testing. "What happened?" "I left the force." Marcus kept his tone neutral, empty of the things he'd never said out loud to strangers. "Now I'm asking you to sit down or leave the restaurant. You're disturbing other guests." "Disturbing?" One of the other men laughed, but it came out bitter and wrong. "That's rich. You know what's disturbing? Losing your job because some billionaire pulls their money out of your factory. 200 people unemployed overnight. But sure, we're the problem because we're a little loud." Victoria stood up from her table, and every eye in the immediate area turned toward her. What is this about? The tall one? Marcus's memory supplied the name. David Torres turned to face her fully. You don't even know, do you, Crosspoint Ventures? You pulled your investment from Lakewood Manufacturing 10 months ago. You remember that decision? Victoria's expression remained controlled, but Marcus saw the slight tension in her shoulders, the micro-adjustment that said she was calculating exit strategies. That's business. The project wasn't profitable. Business. David's voice dripped with contempt. You sit here in your $1,000 suit, eating meals that cost more than my weekly unemployment check, and you call it business. The younger man found his courage again, stepping closer. My wife left me because I couldn't pay the mortgage. Lost the house. Lost my kid. You want to call that business too? Marcus raised his hand slightly, a calming gesture he'd used 100 times in his old life. I understand you're angry, but this isn't the place. David looked at him with something like pity. You understand? You're taking orders from people like her now, serving them water and clearing their plates. You really think you understand? For a brief moment, Marcus wondered if David was right. Maybe he didn't understand anything. Maybe he'd taken the easy path, hiding in this job instead of facing the world that had broken him. But then he saw Victoria's hand trembling slightly as she gripped her iPad, and he remembered why he'd walked away from police work in the first place. He was tired of watching people get hurt. Marcus's voice dropped lower, stripped of the polite server tone. It came out with the authority he'd carried for 8 years in uniform, the voice of someone who knew how to handle situations right before they went sideways. If you want to talk, we can do this the right way, but you need to step back from her table. Now. The word hung in the air between them. Something in Marcus's posture had shifted without him meaning it to. Shoulders squared, weight centered, hands relaxed but ready. The muscle memory of a man who talked down armed suspects and walked into domestic disputes where everyone was past the point of listening to reason. David studied him for a long moment, then nodded once. All right, Cole, let's talk. Marcus gestured toward the rear of the restaurant. There's a courtyard out back, service area for staff. We can talk there without disturbing anyone. The dining room had gone quiet enough that the piano music sounded too loud now, filling spaces where conversation used to be. Other guests watched with the careful stillness of people trying not to get involved, phones probably already out under tables, ready to call 911 if this went wrong. Victoria remained standing by her table, expression unreadable. Marcus caught Sarah's eye, another server working the floor, and tilted his head slightly toward the kitchen, their silent signal for trouble. She gave a barely perceptible nod and moved toward the back to alert Paul Romano. The courtyard was technically a service area, a concrete square enclosed by brick walls where staff came to catch their breath between rushes or sneak cigarettes despite the no-smoking policy. A few metal chairs sat scattered around a table someone had dragged out months ago, never bothered to bring back in. String lights hung overhead, half of them burnt out. The November air carried the smell of grease from the kitchen vents mixing with the distant scent of the Chicago River. Marcus held the door open as the 4 men filed out. The young one kept glancing back at the dining room like he was already regretting this. The other 2, one built like a linebacker, the other lean with weathered hands, moved with the weary caution of men who'd learned to expect trouble but were too tired to avoid it anymore. David Torres was the last to step outside. He stopped in front of Marcus, close enough that Marcus could see the gray in his stubble, the lines around his eyes that came from squinting into welding torches or machinery, or whatever work had defined his life before it got taken away. You really want to help us, or are you just protecting your rich customers? I want to stop this from getting worse. Marcus held his gaze. Too late for that. David's voice went quiet, which somehow felt more dangerous than when he'd been loud. It's already worse, has been for 10 months. The door closed behind them, muffling the restaurant noise. Out here, the city sounds took over. Distant traffic, a siren several blocks away, the hum of air conditioning units on the buildings surrounding them. Marcus pulled out one of the metal chairs, the legs scraping against concrete. Sit if you want. I can get coffee, water, whatever you need. We don't need coffee. David stayed standing, arms crossed. We need that woman in there to understand what she did. The nervous young man finally spoke up, his voice carrying a tremor that hadn't been there before. I'm Jimmy Torres. Worked at Lakewood Manufacturing for 12 years. Started as an apprentice welder right out of high school. Worked my way up to specialty pieces, the custom orders that needed precision. I was proud of that work. His hands were shaking now. My wife, we met at the factory Christmas party in 2015. Married 2 years later. Bought a house in Cicero, nothing fancy, but it was ours. When Lakewood shut down, I kept getting up every morning, putting on work clothes, pretending I was going to my job. I'd drive to the library and fill out applications for 8 hours. Then I'd come home like I'd been at work. She figured it out after 3 months, took our son and left. I'm living with my brother now, sleeping on his couch, delivering for DoorDash at night because nobody wants to hire a 42-year-old welder when they can get a kid fresh out of trade school for half the wage. The linebacker sat down heavily in one of the metal chairs. Carlos Mendez, 20 years fixing machines when they broke. Knew every press, every conveyor, every hydraulic system in that plant. Could diagnose a problem just from the sound it made. His voice was flat, drained of emotion. My daughter had a full scholarship to University of Illinois, pre-med program. Full ride for tuition, but we still needed to cover housing, books, living expenses. I was covering that. She made it through 2 years before I lost my job. Had to drop out. Works at Target now, overnight stocking shelves. Tells me it's fine. She'll go back when we save enough. But I see how she looks at me. Like I broke a promise I didn't know I was making. The lean man with weathered hands remained standing, but his shoulders had dropped slightly, like even holding himself upright took effort he wasn't sure he had anymore. Jack Henderson, 54 years old. Ran the second shift at Lakewood, 60 people under my supervision for the last 8 years. When corporate announced the closure, they all came to me asking what to do next, what jobs were out there, whether their pensions were safe. They trusted me to have answers. Jack's weathered hands clasped together, knuckles white. I didn't have any. My wife has MS, multiple sclerosis. Her medications cost $1,800 a month, even with insurance. I had good insurance at Lakewood. Now I'm on my third appeal to get her prescriptions covered under marketplace insurance that costs more and pays for less. She's in pain every day, and I can't afford to help her. Marcus listened, using his old negotiation skills without thinking about it, reflecting what he heard, validating without agreeing, creating space for them to be heard. These weren't career criminals. These were working men who'd built their identities around labor that no longer existed, and the loss had hollowed them out from the inside. David finally sat down, the fight seeming to drain out of him with the movement. And me? I was the foreman. Third generation at Lakewood. My grandfather helped build that factory in 1967. My father worked line supervision for 35 years, and I put in 22 years before Crosspoint Ventures decided we weren't profitable enough. I'm 45 years old with a resume that says I'm great at managing factory workers in an industry that's dying in this city. My wife still believes in me, still thinks I'll find something, but I see her checking our bank account late at night when she thinks I'm asleep. We're 3 months behind on the mortgage. The bank sent another notice yesterday. The silence that followed felt heavy enough to press down on their shoulders. Marcus had spent 10 years as a cop listening to people's worst moments, but something about this felt different. These men hadn't broken any laws. They just had the ground cut out from under them by people who'd never bothered to see their faces. You asked what happened to me. Marcus heard himself speaking before he decided to. Why I left the force. He looked at the 4 of them, seeing his own reflection in their exhaustion. I was with the Crisis Intervention Unit. We handled situations where someone needed de-escalation before violence happened. Domestic disputes, mental health calls, people on ledges. I thought I was good at it. 47 successful interventions over 8 years. 0 casualties. The night air felt colder. Marcus could see it all again, sharp and clear, like it had happened yesterday instead of 3 years ago. Then I got called to a domestic dispute. Husband had been drinking, neighbors heard screaming. Wife was scared but trying to downplay it, said it was just an argument that got loud. I talked to him, used all my training, thought I'd calmed him down. He apologized, said it wouldn't happen again, seemed genuine, so I left. Thought I'd done my job. Marcus's hands were flat on the table now, grounding himself in the cold metal. 2 hours later, Sarah Chen was in the hospital with 3 broken ribs, a fractured jaw, and a traumatic brain injury. She survived, but she'll never be the same. Lost her short-term memory permanently. Can't hold a dom, can't live independently. She was 29 years old. The silence that followed felt like understanding. David leaned forward. So you get it. What it's like to lose the thing you were good at. I get it. Marcus met his eyes. Jimmy's voice came out barely above a whisper. My wife left 3 months ago. Took our son, filed for divorce. Every morning I get up and I don't know what I'm supposed to do with myself, who I'm supposed to be. Carlos shook his head slowly. My daughter pretends she's fine with working at Target, shows me pictures of her coworkers, talks about how she's saving money. But I found her old pre-med textbooks in a box in the garage last week. She'd written notes in the margins. This will be on the final, and remember this for boards. She was so sure of her future. I took that from her. Jack's weathered hands were trembling now. When you can't afford to ease your wife's pain, when you watch her try to hide how much it hurts because she knows you're already drowning in guilt, that's a special kind of hell. The medication exists. The treatment exists. I just can't pay for it. Marcus felt the weight of their stories. This was what Victoria Cross couldn't see from her corner table. The human cost of spreadsheet decisions. These men had built their lives around work that no longer valued them, and the loss had fractured something essential. David stood up abruptly. So what now? You brought us out here to listen, but listening doesn't change anything. Victoria Cross goes back to her office, makes more decisions that destroy more lives, and we're supposed to just accept it? No, the voice came from behind them. Victoria stood in the doorway to the courtyard, coat draped over one arm. But there's a difference between making someone listen and making them a target. You came here ready to intimidate me. That won't help anyone. Marcus stood immediately. Miss Cross, you should go back inside. She ignored him, her attention fixed on the 4 men. I overheard part of your conversation through the door. Lakewood Manufacturing, I remember that decision. David's expression hardened, and the other 3 men stood slowly. Of course you remember. Probably made you feel very efficient, very businesslike. Victoria's voice remained steady, but Marcus could see the tension in the way she held herself. We pulled our investment because the factory was losing money. Revenue down 22% over 18 months, projected losses of $8 million over 3 years. That's business reality. Business reality, Jimmy's voice cracked on the words. You keep using that phrase like it absolves you of everything. I'm stating facts. Victoria's facade stayed intact, but Marcus noticed the slight shift in her posture, the micro-adjustments of someone who wasn't used to being confronted like this. Carlos took a step forward. Here's a fact. 200 people lost their jobs. Not because they weren't working hard enough, because you decided the numbers didn't look good enough. Jack's quiet voice cut through. Did you ever come to the factory? Before you pulled out, did you ever meet the people working there, see what they were building, understand what that place meant to the community? That's not how investment works. Victoria's control was slipping slightly now, words coming faster. We reviewed data, financial projections, market analysis. If I visited every investment property, I'd never have time to run my company. So the answer is no. Jack's statement hung in the cold air. You never met us. We were just data to you. Something flickered across Victoria's face. Maybe the first crack in her armor, a glimpse of the person underneath the CEO mask. If I spent time thinking about every individual affected by every business decision, I'd never be able to function. I'd be paralyzed, but that's the point. David's anger had cooled into something sharper, more focused. You run a company that manages billions. We had lives. And you treated our lives like they were disposable line items on a spreadsheet. Marcus moved between them, trying to create space before this escalated again. Miss Cross, why did you come out here? She looked at him, and for the first time since he'd started serving her 2 years ago, he saw uncertainty in her eyes. Because you've been bringing me water twice a week for 2 years, and tonight I find out you used to be a detective. Because 4 men showed up claiming my decisions destroyed their lives. Because nothing about tonight makes sense, and I need to understand what's happening. What makes sense is that you're finally seeing the consequences of your choices. David's voice was hard. Victoria turned to face him directly. And what were you planning to do before Marcus stopped you? Four men approaching a woman dining alone. You knew exactly what that would feel like. You wanted me afraid. David's jaw tightened. Good. You should know what it's like to have your security taken away, to feel powerless, to understand that the ground under your feet isn't solid anymore. Marcus's voice cut through with the authority he tried to leave behind. That's enough, David. You said you wanted to talk. So talk. Tell her what you need, not what you want to take from her, what you actually need. What I need? David's control finally broke. I need my job back. I need to be able to look my wife in the eye without seeing disappointment. I need to not wake up at 3 in the morning running numbers that won't work no matter how many times I calculate them. I need my life back. I need my daughter back in school. Carlos's voice was rough. She had dreams, real dreams. She was going to be a doctor, save lives. Now she's stocking shelves and pretending it's fine because she doesn't want to make me feel worse than I already do. Jimmy's voice was barely audible. I need to stop lying, stop pretending, stop waking up with no purpose and going to bed with no hope. Jack said nothing, but the pain in his eyes spoke volumes. The specific hell of watching someone you love suffer when the solution exists but remains out of reach. Victoria stood very still, processing what she'd heard. Then something in her expression shifted. Not much, but enough for Marcus to notice. A softening around the eyes, a slight drop in her shoulders, like armor being removed one piece at a time. I didn't know. The words came out quiet, almost fragile. I sit in meetings and review spreadsheets and make decisions that seem logical on paper. I don't think about the people behind the numbers because if I did, if I let myself see all of it, I'd never be able to make hard choices. That's what I tell myself anyway. She looked at Marcus, and there was something in her gaze he'd never seen before. You asked why I came out here. I spend most of my time around people who either want something from me or are afraid of me. It's isolating. And when you step between me and these men tonight, you weren't doing it for money or because I'm your boss. You did it because you thought it was right. Her voice dropped lower. I haven't seen that kind of integrity in a long time. It made me wonder if maybe I've been wrong about some things. The words seemed to surprise her as much as they surprised everyone else. Before anyone could respond, the courtyard door opened and Paul Romano stepped out, his expression tight with the kind of concern that came from years of running an establishment where problems were supposed to be handled before they became visible. He was in his 50s, suit immaculate, radiating the authority of someone who'd built a career on making sure nothing disturbed the carefully curated atmosphere his restaurant promised. Marcus, what's going on here? His eyes took in the scene, the four men, Victoria, the tension thick enough to feel. Miss Cross, are you all right? Should I call the police? The word police made all four men tense. Even David's certainty faltered slightly, the reality of potential arrest cutting through anger. Victoria looked at the four men, then at Marcus, and when she spoke, her voice carried the CEO authority Marcus had only heard in fragments before. No police. These gentlemen and I are having a conversation. Marcus was helping facilitate it. Paul blinked, clearly not expecting that answer. Miss Cross, I really think... I said no police. Her tone left no room for argument. That's final. Paul turned his attention to Marcus, and there was disappointment mixed with concern in his expression. You're supposed to be working the floor. We have customers waiting for service. Marcus stays. Victoria's voice was firm. We're not finished here. Paul's face suggested this entire situation was giving him the kind of headache that would last days. With all due respect, Miss Cross, this is highly irregular. I have a responsibility to my staff and my other guests, which can be covered by your other servers for a few more minutes. Victoria's business voice had returned fully. I appreciate your concern, but this conversation is important. Paul gave them all one more look that promised there would be consequences for someone later, then retreated back inside. The door clicked shut with a finality that said they had maybe 10 minutes before he returned with different demands. Marcus turned to face the group. We need to resolve this now. You came here angry, and you had every right to be. But now you need to decide what you actually want, revenge or a way forward. He looked at Victoria, and you need to decide if you're willing to see these men as people instead of problems you can dismiss. The string lights overhead cast uneven shadows across the courtyard. Somewhere in the distance, a siren faded away. The city kept moving around them, indifferent to the small human drama playing out in this forgotten corner. Victoria broke the silence first. I can't give you your jobs back. Lakewood Manufacturing is closed. That decision is final. David's expression started to darken, but she held up a hand. But Crosspoint Ventures runs a workforce development program. We train people for new industries, help them transition to growing sectors, renewable energy installation, advanced manufacturing, logistics management. If you're willing to retrain, I can get you into the program. It covers tuition and provides a stipend during training. $2,000 a month for 6 months while you learn new skills. After completion, we have partnerships with companies that are hiring. The placement rate is 84%. Jimmy looked skeptical. Why would you do that? You don't owe us anything. Victoria met his eyes. Because tonight someone reminded me that behind every business decision are human beings with families and dreams and bills they can't pay. And because making this offer cost me less than living with the knowledge that I could have helped and chose not to. Jack spoke quietly. The 60 people from my shift, can they join too? Not just us 4, all of them. Yes. Victoria's answer came without hesitation. All 340 former Lakewood employees. I'll need to verify employment records, but if they work there when we pulled our investment, they're eligible. David still looked skeptical, arms crossed, but Marcus could see something shifting in his expression. Not trust exactly, but maybe the beginning of hope fighting against the bitterness that had sustained him through 10 months of rejection. What do you get out of this? Victoria smiled, but there was no warmth in it. I get to sleep at night. That's worth something. The 4 men exchanged looks, having a conversation without words. Finally, Jimmy nodded. Okay, I'll try it. I've got nothing to lose at this point. Carlos followed. Me too. At least it's a chance. Jack simply said, yes. All eyes turned to David. He stood silent for a long moment, jaw tight, the weight of representing not just himself but everyone else from Lakewood pressing down on his shoulders. Then something in his posture gave way slightly. Fine. But I want it in writing, a formal offer, not just words in a courtyard. You'll have a formal offer letter by Monday. Victoria's business voice had returned. Email with program details, enrollment process, everything documented. My assistant will contact you with next steps. The tension that had filled the courtyard finally began to ease, dissipating like fog burning off under sunlight. It wasn't perfect resolution. Too much damage had been done for that. Too much pain that wouldn't heal just because someone offered a training program. But it was something. A fragile agreement built on exhaustion in the slim hope that maybe, possibly, things could get better. David stepped toward Marcus and extended his hand. You're all right, Reed. You could have called the cops on us. Could have made this uglier than it needed to be. Marcus shook his hand, feeling the calluses from years of factory work. I've seen what happens when you treat desperate people like criminals instead of human beings. It doesn't fix anything. The 4 men headed toward the exit that led to the alley behind the restaurant. As they filed out, Jimmy stopped and looked back at Victoria. Thank you. I know you didn't have to do this. Victoria nodded once, and then they were gone, disappearing into the Chicago night. Marcus and Victoria stood alone in the courtyard. The sound of the restaurant filtered through the door, dishes clattering, muted conversation, the piano still playing something forgettable, the normal rhythm of a Friday night that had been anything but normal. You could have called the police. Victoria's voice was quieter now, stripped of the CEO authority. Why didn't you? Because I've been a cop long enough to know that arresting 4 unemployed men for making threats wouldn't solve the actual problem. It would just create more damage. Marcus looked at her. They weren't criminals. They were desperate. There's a difference. That's why you left the force. Victoria's statement wasn't a question. The woman who got hurt, Sarah Chen, you stopped trusting yourself because you couldn't save her. I stopped trusting myself because I thought I had. Marcus's voice went flat. I walked away believing I'd done enough, and I was wrong. She paid the price for my confidence. But tonight you trusted yourself. You stepped in, talked them down, created space for everyone to be heard. Those are the actions of someone who knows what they're doing, or someone who got lucky. Marcus met her eyes. I won't know which until I see if this actually helps them or if it's just another situation I misjudged. Victoria pulled out her phone. Marcus Reed, that's your full name? Yes. She typed something, then looked up. The waiter who's actually a crisis negotiator, former crisis negotiator, current waiter who's probably about to lose this job too. I'll talk to Paul Romano. Make sure he understands what happened here. You don't need to do that. I know, but I'm going to anyway. She moved toward the door, then stopped. You said you failed. That woman who got hurt. You think that makes you a failure? Marcus didn't answer right away. I think it means I wasn't as good as I thought I was. Or maybe it means you were human. Victoria's voice softened slightly. Maybe the real failure would have been stopping trying altogether. She opened the door. Thank you for tonight, for seeing what I couldn't. What's that? That it's possible to care about people you don't know, that business decisions have faces attached to them. She went back inside, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts. The November air felt colder now, or maybe it was just the adrenaline draining from his system. His hands were steady, breathing even. For 3 years, he'd been hiding from situations where his judgment mattered. Tonight, all of that had come rushing back. The fear, the uncertainty, the weight of knowing his choices could help people or hurt them. But for the first time since he turned in his badge, he didn't feel like a failure. He felt like himself. Marcus checked his phone. 9:45. Sophie would be asleep by the time he got home, curled up with whatever stuffed animal had won bedtime privileges tonight. He typed a quick message to Mrs. Patterson, the neighbor who watched her on Friday nights. I'll be home soon. Had an interesting evening. He added, thank you for staying late. Then he went back inside to face whatever consequences Paul Romano had waiting. But when he stepped through the door, he found Victoria standing near the host stand, speaking with the manager in low tones. Paul's expression had shifted from anger to something closer to understanding, though he still looked like a man who'd aged 5 years in the last hour. Victoria caught Marcus's eye and gave a small nod before collecting her coat. She paused at the door and looked back at him one more time. There was something different in her expression now. Not quite warmth, but maybe the beginning of recognition. Like she was seeing him for the first time instead of just registering his presence as part of the restaurant's background. Then she was gone into the night, and Paul was gesturing Marcus toward his office. The office smelled like old paperwork and espresso, cramped enough that 2 people felt like a crowd. Paul sat behind a desk covered in receipts and scheduling sheets, looking at Marcus with the expression of someone trying to figure out a puzzle that didn't make sense. Miss Cross explained the situation. Paul's voice was measured. 4 men came here to confront her about a business decision. You moved them outside to prevent a scene, help mediate the conflict. Is that accurate? Yes, sir. She also mentioned you used to be a police officer, crisis intervention specialist, detective. Marcus kept his voice neutral. I left the force 3 years ago. Paul pulled off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. I should fire you, walking away from your tables, taking potentially dangerous men to our service area, getting involved in something that had nothing to do with your job. Any of those things would normally be grounds for immediate termination. Marcus nodded, accepting the reality. I understand, but I'm not going to. Paul put his glasses back on. Miss Cross said you potentially prevented a violent situation from escalating. She also said if I fired you, she'd stop coming here, and she's one of our best customers. So I'm caught between doing what's right for my restaurant and doing what's economically sensible. Marcus waited, not sure which way this was going to fall. She told me something else too. Paul leaned forward. She said you saw those 4 men as human beings instead of problems, that you understood they were desperate, not dangerous. And that kind of judgment, the ability to see people clearly, that's rare. His expression softened slightly. You're one of my best servers, Marcus. Reliable, efficient, professional. I never knew you had that kind of background. It wasn't something I wanted to talk about. Marcus's hands were flat on his knees. I walked away from that life for a reason. And tonight it came back. Paul stood up. Get back on the floor. We still have an hour left on your shift. And Marcus, next time something like this happens, and I pray to God there is no next time, you come get me first. Understood? Understood. Marcus left the office feeling oddly lighter despite everything that had happened. He cleared Victoria's table, noting her half-finished meal and the generous tip left in cash. The rest of the shift passed in familiar rhythm, refilling water glasses, clearing plates, avoiding Sarah's curious looks because he wasn't ready to explain yet. By 11:15, the last customers were settling their checks and his feet ached in the specific way that came from 6 hours of constant movement. He counted his tips while Sarah complained about a table that had stayed too long and ordered too little, the mundane complaints of restaurant work that felt comforting in their normalcy. Walking to his car through the parking garage, Marcus checked his phone. A photo from Sophie, the stick figure drawing she'd sent earlier, the three people holding hands, and a new message from an unknown number. This is Victoria Cross. Paul Romano gave me your contact information. I'd like to speak with you when you have time. No pressure, but I have a proposition that might interest you. Marcus stared at the message for a long moment. Part of him wanted to ignore it, keep his life simple and contained. But another part was curious about what a billionaire CEO could possibly want from a waiter. He typed back, I'm free tomorrow afternoon if that works. The response came immediately. 2 p.m. I'll send you the address. Marcus drove home through empty streets, his mind still processing everything that had happened. The city looked different at night, less dangerous than he used to think during his patrol years, more complicated. He passed Lakewood Manufacturing's old building, dark and abandoned now, a for lease sign visible in the streetlights. 340 people used to work there. 340 lives disrupted by a decision made in an office by someone who'd never seen their faces. When he unlocked his apartment door, Mrs. Patterson was asleep on his couch with a Korean drama playing softly on the television. She woke immediately when he touched her shoulder, alert despite the late hour. How was Sophie? Marcus asked quietly. Perfect, as always. Mrs. Patterson gathered her things. Homework done, dinner eaten, in bed by 8:30 like clockwork. She's a good kid, Marcus. You're doing right by her. How was your night? Marcus thought about the question, the confrontation, the courtyard conversation, Victoria's unexpected offer to help, the strange message asking him to meet tomorrow. Complicated. But okay, Mrs. Patterson smiled. Complicated can be good sometimes. Means things are changing. After she left, Marcus looked in on Sophie. She was asleep in her small bedroom, surrounded by stuffed animals and books, dark hair spread across the pillow. One hand curled near her face, clutching the edge of her favorite blanket. She looked peaceful in a way that made his chest tighten with love and fear and the weight of trying to be enough for someone who deserved everything. He pulled the blanket up slightly and kissed her forehead. She stirred but didn't wake, just made a small sound and settled deeper into sleep. In his own room, Marcus sat on the edge of his bed and looked at Victoria's message again. What kind of proposition would a CEO have for a waiter? The practical part of his brain said this was probably some kind of consulting thing, maybe helping her understand how to communicate with the workforce development program participants. The part that had spent 10 years reading, people wondered if it was something more. He thought about David Torres and the three other men, about the desperation in their eyes and the way hope had flickered back to life when Victoria offered them a chance. He thought about Sarah Chen lying in a hospital bed 3 years ago while he sat in the waiting room trying to figure out how he'd gotten everything so wrong. He thought about Sophie's drawing, the family of 3 people, always 3, even though it was just the 2 of them. For 3 years, he'd convinced himself that stepping back was safer, that avoiding situations where his judgment mattered was the right choice for everyone. But tonight had reminded him of something he'd tried to forget. Sometimes doing nothing was more dangerous than doing something. His phone buzzed with Sophie's alarm reminder for tomorrow, soccer practice at 10, then lunch, then the mysterious meeting with Victoria Cross at 2. Normal Saturday routine disrupted by something that felt like it might change everything, though he couldn't quite see how yet. Marcus lay down, but sleep didn't come easily. His mind kept returning to the courtyard, to the moment when Victoria's armor had cracked and he'd seen something vulnerable underneath, to the way she'd looked at him when she said he'd reminded her it was possible to care about strangers, to the question of what tomorrow's proposition might be and whether he was ready to step back into a world where his choices mattered. The city lights glowed through his window, Chicago settling into its late-night rhythm. Somewhere out there, David Torres was probably lying awake too, wondering if Victoria's offer was real or just another broken promise. Jimmy was maybe not pretending anymore, telling his brother the truth about what had happened. Carlos was hopefully sleeping better, knowing his daughter might get another chance. Jack was sitting with his wife, talking about possibilities instead of just pain. And Victoria Cross was in whatever penthouse or mansion billionaires lived in, maybe questioning decisions she'd been certain about for years. Or maybe not. Maybe she'd go back to being the ice queen on Monday, and tonight would fade into just another business problem solved. Marcus didn't know. That was the thing about stepping into situations where your judgment mattered. You never really knew if you'd made the right call until time showed you the consequences. He'd learned that the hard way with Sarah Chin. Maybe he was about to learn it again. But as he finally drifted towards sleep, Sophie's drawing visible on his nightstand in the dim light, he realized something had shifted. For the first time in 3 years, he didn't feel like he was hiding. He felt like he was standing still, watching something approach. And instead of running away, he was waiting to see what happened next. Tomorrow would bring answers or more questions. Either way, he was ready. Saturday morning arrived with Sophie bouncing on Marcus's bed at 7, too excited about soccer practice to let him sleep past dawn. They spent the morning at the fields on the south side, watching her kick goals with the fierce determination she applied to everything, then grabbed burgers at the diner where he worked breakfast shifts during the week. She talked about a science project on butterflies while he tried not to think about the meeting waiting at 2 o'clock. Patterson agreed to watch Sophie for the afternoon without asking questions, though her eyes carried curiosity. Marcus changed into his good suit, the only suit, and drove downtown with his stomach tight. Crosspoint Ventures occupied the entire 15th floor of a glass tower that made Chateau Noir look modest. The reception area had leather chairs and abstract art that probably cost more than his annual salary. He gave his name to the receptionist, a young woman with perfect makeup who looked at him like she was trying to figure out how a waiter had ended up on Victoria Cross's calendar. "Miss Cross will see you now." She led him through a maze of cubicles and glass-walled conference rooms where people worked on a Saturday, heads down over laptops, the hum of ambition filling the air. Victoria's office sat in the corner with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Chicago. The desk was clean except for a laptop and a single photo frame facing away from the door. She stood when he entered, dressed more casually than at the restaurant. Dark jeans, gray sweater, hair down around her shoulders. It made her look younger, less like the ice queen reputation suggested. "Thank you for coming." She gestured to a chair across from her desk, then moved to sit behind him rather than behind the barrier. "Creating equality instead of hierarchy. I've been thinking about last night, about how you handled that situation." Marcus waited, still uncertain why he was here. "You saw 4 angry men and didn't just see a threat. You saw people who were hurting. That's what I was trained to do. Most people don't have that training." Victoria leaned forward slightly, and even fewer would choose to use it while working for minimum wage. "I want to offer you a position. Community Impact Director for Crosspoint Ventures. Your role would be to interface between our investments and the communities they affect, to be the person who sees the human cost of our business decisions before those decisions get made." Marcus felt his pulse quicken. "I'm not qualified for that. I don't have a business degree, no corporate experience. You're qualified because you know how to listen, because you know how to de-escalate conflict, because you see people instead of problems." Victoria pulled a folder from her desk drawer. "This is the position description and compensation package. Take it home. Think about it." He opened the folder. The salary number made his stomach drop, $95,000. More than triple what he made working 2 jobs. Enough to move to a better neighborhood, save for Sophie's college, stop calculating every grocery purchase. But the number also terrified him because it meant stepping back into a world where his judgment mattered, where he could fail spectacularly again. "Why me?" You could hire someone with actual corporate experience. Because last night, when four men showed up ready to cause harm, you didn't call security or hide. You stepped forward. That's not something you can teach. That's character. Marcus closed the folder, mind racing through objections. Can I ask you something? Last night, when you offered those men the training program, was that something you'd been planning, or did you make it up on the spot? Victoria's smile carried no warmth. Both. The program exists. We've had it for 2 years, but I'd never once thought about offering it to anyone from Lakewood Manufacturing until that moment. You made me see them differently, and that's what you want me to do? Make you see people differently? I want you to make sure we don't create more situations like Lakewood. People who feel invisible because we couldn't be bothered to consider them. She stood, pacing to the window. I've built this company on rational decisions, on separating emotion from business. But rational doesn't mean right. I'm starting to understand that. Marcus studied her, seeing past the CEO armor for the second time. What happened to make you this way? Victoria turned from the window, and for a moment he thought she'd shut down the question. Instead, she moved back to her chair. My brother died when I was 16. Factory accident at a plant on the south side. Machine malfunction, no safety protocols, and the company blamed the workers. James was 23. He'd worked there since he was 18, supporting our family after our father left. Her voice stayed level, but pain leaked through. I grew up in a trailer park in Harvey, watching my mother work 3 jobs and still not make enough. I swore I'd never be that powerless again. Got a scholarship to Northwestern, worked my way through, built this company from nothing. So you armored yourself against the world that took your brother. Marcus understood now, and in the process, you became what you hated. Victoria's expression flickered. Yes. I didn't see it until last night, until you put yourself between me and those men, and I realized I'd spent 15 years making decisions that hurt people just like James. People who worked hard and played by the rules and got destroyed anyway. The silence stretched between them, heavy with things neither knew how to say. Take the weekend, Victoria's business voice returned. Think about the offer. Call me Monday with your answer. What if I say no? Then I'll respect your decision and keep coming to Chateau Noir twice a week. Nothing changes except now I'll know your real name. Marcus left with the folder feeling like he was carrying evidence of a crime he hadn't committed yet. The elevator ride down felt longer than it should have. In the parking garage, he sat in his car and read through the position description again. Stakeholder engagement, community liaison. Corporate language wrapped around asking him to do what he'd done Friday night. See people, listen to them, help them feel heard. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. This is David Torres. Need to talk to you. Important. Marcus called him back. David's voice came through rough, like he'd been smoking or shouting. We called her, Victoria. She wants to meet Wednesday at 4. Said you should be there too. Why me? She specifically requested you. Said she trusts your judgment. David paused. I don't know if I trust this, Marcus. Feels too easy. Rich people don't just decide to help out of nowhere. Maybe she's serious. Marcus watched a couple walk past his car, laughing about something. Maybe Friday night actually changed something, or maybe it's PR. Make herself look good, we sign some papers. Nothing actually happens. David's skepticism cut deep. I've been burned enough times to know when something seems too good to be true. Wednesday at 4, I'll be there. After hanging up, Marcus drove home through neighborhoods he used to patrol. The city looked different now. Not dangerous or safe, just complicated. People making choices with incomplete information, trying to survive in systems that didn't care about their names. Sophie was drawing when he got home, another family portrait with careful stick figures. She looked up with the smile that made everything else disappear for a moment. Did you get a new job, Dad? Maybe. We'll see. Will you be happier? The question hit harder than she meant it to. I don't know yet, kiddo, but I'm thinking about it. That night, after Sophie was asleep, Marcus researched Victoria Cross properly for the first time. Forbes articles about her ruthless business decisions. Chicago Tribune pieces calling her the Ice Queen of venture capital. A Northwestern alumni magazine from 2008 with a photo that made his breath stop. Victoria and Sarah Chen, roommates, smiling in graduation robes. He found another article buried in the archives. Victoria Cross donates $100,000 to scholarship fund in memory of roommate Sarah Chen. The date was 3 months after Sarah's assault, when she was still in rehabilitation learning to live with permanent brain damage. Marcus called Victoria's number. She answered on the second ring. You knew. About Sarah. You were her roommate. Yeah. So this whole thing is what? Pity? Guilt? His anger surprised him with its intensity. It's about recognizing that you're one of the few people who understands that decisions have consequences. Victoria's voice stayed calm. Sarah told me about you, about how you visited her every week in the hospital, how you blamed yourself for something that wasn't your fault. She doesn't blame you, Marcus. She wishes you'd forgive yourself. You should have told me. Would you have listened if I had? The question hung in the air. Or would you have assumed I was manipulating you and walked away? Marcus had no answer to that. Sarah recovered enough to work at a community center now. She helps domestic violence survivors rebuild their lives. Victoria's voice softened. She's not defined by what happened to her. Maybe you shouldn't be either. He hung up feeling raw and uncertain. The connection between them made sense now. Victoria had known who he was from the first time he served her water at Chateau Noir. She'd been watching him for 2 years, and he'd never noticed. Sunday passed in a fog. Sophie wanted to go to the park, so they spent the afternoon on swings and slides while he tried to process everything. Mrs. Patterson made dinner, her Korean stew filling the apartment with smells that reminded him of when Jennifer was alive, and their life had different possibilities. Monday morning, he worked his breakfast shift at the diner, pouring coffee and making small talk with regulars who didn't know his life was tilting sideways. At noon, he picked up his phone and typed, "I'll take the job, but I have conditions." Victoria's response came within minutes. "I'm listening. I need to shadow you for 2 weeks first, unpaid. I need to see how you actually make decisions. And I need veto power on investments that could harm communities." Her response took longer this time. Finally, veto power? No executive gives that up. Then I'm not the right person. 3 dots appeared and disappeared multiple times. Finally, 2 week shadow period. Then we'll discuss veto power. The Wednesday meeting felt like stepping into a different universe. David, Ryan, Frank, and Jack waited in the CrossPoint Ventures lobby, all cleaned up and nervous. A receptionist led them to a conference room where Victoria waited with a man she introduced as Michael Bradford, her COO. He had skeptical written across his face in permanent marker. Victoria presented the workforce development program like she was pitching to investors, slides showing training pathways, partnership companies, success rates, 6 months of renewable energy certification or advanced manufacturing training, $2,000 monthly stipend, job placement assistance with an 84% success rate, mental health counseling for families struggling with the transition, total investment from CrossPoint Ventures, $8.2 million over 18 months. All 340 former Lakewood employees eligible. Michael Bradford looked like someone had forced him to swallow glass. "This is financially irresponsible. Our shareholders will revolt." Victoria didn't flinch. "We'll position it as an ESG initiative. Environmental, social, and governance investing is growing. This program could become a model we license to other firms." Frank Donovan spoke up, his voice carrying residual anger from Friday night. "Why should we believe this is real? You destroyed our lives with a signature. Now you're supposed to save us? I can't save anyone." Victoria met his gaze. "I can offer tools and resources. What you do with them is your choice. But this program exists, and it's available to you." David Torres remained silent, arms crossed, calculating. "Finally, I want oversight, independent verification, not just your company saying the program works. Actual third-party assessment. Done." Victoria didn't hesitate. "I'll establish a worker advisory board. You will chair it. Paid position, 20 hours a week, reviewing our community impact assessments." The 4 men looked at each other, communicating without words. One by one, they nodded agreement, even David, though his skepticism didn't fade entirely. After they left, Victoria asked Marcus to stay. Michael Bradford gave him a look that suggested he blamed Marcus for this expensive detour from pure profit, then left them alone. "I meant what I said about the job." Victoria pulled out a formal offer letter, 95,000 salary, benefits, equity options after 1 year. Start date flexible, but I'd like you on board within 2 weeks. I need the shadow period first. Marcus held firm. 2 weeks watching how you operate. Then I'll decide. You don't trust me. I don't trust myself yet. Marcus met her eyes. I need to know if I can actually do this without failing again. Victoria studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Start Monday. You'll attend all my meetings, review all our active investments, ask any questions you want. At the end of 2 weeks, you decide. One more thing. Marcus felt his heart rate climb. If I take this job, I need actual authority, not just advisory, veto power on decisions that could significantly harm workers or communities. That's not how corporate hierarchy works. Then make it work. Marcus stood his ground. Otherwise, I'm just window dressing. Someone you parade around to make yourself feel better while still making the same decisions. Victoria's expression hardened. You're asking me to give up control. I'm asking you to prove you meant what you said Friday night, that you want to change how business gets done. They stared at each other, neither willing to back down. Finally, Victoria's posture shifted slightly. 2 weeks. We'll revisit this conversation after you've seen how the company actually operates. If you still think you need veto power, we'll negotiate terms. Marcus extended his hand. Deal. Her handshake was firm, professional, and lasted a fraction of a second longer than necessary. The first week shadowing Victoria felt like drinking from a fire hose. Board meetings where millions got allocated with the emotional weight of ordering lunch. Investment reviews where companies lived or died based on PowerPoint presentations. Site visits to warehouses and manufacturing plants where she walked through with the detached interest of someone touring a museum. Marcus watched her make decisions with surgical precision, cutting away anything that didn't serve maximum profit. She was brilliant, no question about that, but she was also blind to the human cost hiding in the data. On Thursday, they reviewed a proposal to acquire a logistics company in Gary, Indiana. The numbers looked good. The presentation was polished. Victoria was ready to approve. What's the worker retention plan? Marcus spoke up for the first time in a board meeting. The room went quiet. 6 executives turned to look at him like he'd started speaking Mandarin. Excuse me? The CFO's tone dripped condescension. The company currently has 300 employees. What's the plan to retain them after acquisition? Marcus kept his voice neutral. Or will there be layoffs to improve margins? That's being evaluated. The CFO dismissed him. We'll make those decisions after due diligence. So the answer is, you don't know, and you don't have a plan. Marcus looked at Victoria, which means 300 people's futures are uncertain, and nobody's bothering to ask what happens to them. The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. Victoria's expression revealed nothing, but her fingers tapped the table once. A tell Marcus had learned meant she was recalculating. We'll discuss this privately. Her voice was ice. Continue with the presentation. After the meeting, she cornered him in her office. You made me look weak in there. I made you look like someone who asked questions before making decisions. Marcus didn't back down. You said you wanted me to flag human costs. That's what I'm doing. There's a way to do it that doesn't undermine my authority in front of my board. Then tell me the way, and I'll do it differently next time. But I'm not going to stay quiet when I see people being treated like disposable assets. Victoria paced to her window, the Chicago skyline stretching behind her. You're frustrating. You hired me to be frustrating. Marcus watched her shoulders carry tension she never showed in meetings. If you wanted someone who'd just agree with everything, you should have hired a consultant. She turned back, and something in her expression had softened. You're right about the Gary acquisition. I'll have them develop a retention plan before we proceed. Her voice dropped. I'm not used to being challenged. Get used to it. The corner of her mouth lifted, not quite a smile, but close. Fair enough. The second week, they visited potential investment sites. A warehouse in Hammond where workers described safety violations the management swore didn't exist. A manufacturing plant in Joliet where the CEO promised good wages, but the employees Marcus talked to during the tour told different stories. A renewable energy startup on the South Side where the founder actually seemed to care about both profit and people. After each visit, Marcus filed reports. Victoria read them all, asked questions, pushed back on his recommendations. But she also started changing how she evaluated deals, adding worker welfare metrics, requiring community impact assessments. Small shifts, but they added up. Friday of the second week, they reviewed the Gary Logistics acquisition again. The company had developed a comprehensive retention plan, raised wage floors, improved benefits. It would cost CrossPoint Ventures $3 million in reduced profit margins over 5 years. Approve it. Victoria's decision came without hesitation. The board members looked shocked, but she didn't flinch. We're not just buying a company, we're becoming responsible for 300 families. If we can't maintain their employment while making a reasonable profit, we shouldn't be making the acquisition. After the meeting, Marcus found himself alone with Victoria in her office again. The late afternoon sun cut through the windows at angles that made the city look golden. You cost me $3 million today. She didn't sound angry. My board is going to hate you. But you approved it anyway, because you were right. Victoria moved to stand beside him at the window. Those 300 people have names and families and mortgages. Treating them like numbers would make me exactly what I've been trying not to be anymore. They stood in silence, watching the city below. Marcus became aware of how close she was standing, the faint scent of her perfume mixing with the coffee they had been drinking all day. I've made my decision. His voice came out rougher than intended. About the job, I'll take it, but I still need veto power on major decisions that could harm workers. I'll give you advisory authority. Victoria turned to face him. Final decisions stay with me, but nothing moves forward without your sign-off. You can flag concerns, demand additional review, require community impact assessments. If we disagree, we negotiate until we find a solution we both can accept. That's not veto power. It's better. It's partnership. She held his gaze. I don't want someone who can just stop me from making mistakes. I want someone who helps me make better choices. Marcus felt something shift between them, the professional distance compressing into something more complicated. Partnership. Yes, her voice dropped lower. If you're willing, I'm willing. Good. Victoria stepped back, breaking whatever moment had been building. You start officially Monday. Human Resources will handle paperwork. I'll announce it to the board next week. What about David Torres? Marcus asked. He still doesn't trust this. Would you if you were him? Victoria moved back to her desk. He'll chair the Worker Advisory Board starting next month. That'll give him transparency into our operations. Either he'll see we're serious or he'll find evidence we're not. Either way, it's the right thing to do. Marcus left feeling like he'd crossed a threshold he couldn't uncross. The job was real. The responsibility was real. The possibility of failing again was real. But so was the chance to help people before they reached the desperation David and his friends had felt. Sophie was drawing when he got home. Another family portrait. This one had 4 people. He didn't ask who the 4th person was. Part of him already knew. That weekend, David Torres called again. His voice carried an edge Marcus hadn't heard before. I've been doing research about you and Victoria. Sarah Chen. Marcus's stomach dropped. What about her? She was Victoria's roommate at Northwestern. David's accusation landed heavy. You two have history. This whole thing, the program, the job offer, it's connected to something that happened 3 years ago. You want to tell me what's really going on? Sarah was a victim in a case I worked. Marcus tried to keep his voice level. I failed to protect her. Victoria was her friend. That's the connection. So this is guilt money. David's laugh was bitter. Victoria's trying to fix you, and we're the props in her redemption story. You really think that's going to help us? The program is real. The jobs are real. Marcus felt defensive anger rising. Whether Victoria's motivations are perfect doesn't change that 340 people are getting a second chance. Or we're getting used. David's voice went cold. I'm telling the others. We'll decide together whether to trust this. The call ended, leaving Marcus with the sick feeling that everything was about to collapse. He texted Victoria. David knows about Sarah. He thinks we're running some kind of guilt-driven PR stunt. Her response came quickly. Meet me tomorrow. We need to get ahead of this. Sunday afternoon, Victoria met him at a coffee shop in Hyde Park, away from her office in the CrossPoint Ventures world. She wore jeans and a Northwestern sweatshirt that made her look like a different person entirely. They sat in the back corner, where no one would recognize the billionaire CEO slumming it with a former waiter. David's not wrong to be suspicious. Victoria wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. Sarah was my best friend in college. When I heard what happened to her, I blamed myself for not being there. I'd moved to New York for my first venture capital job. She was alone in Chicago dealing with an abusive husband, and I was chasing money. You visited her in the hospital every weekend for 6 months. Victoria's voice went quiet. She told me about you, about the detective who kept coming back even though the department said he didn't have to, who sat with her during physical therapy and helped her relearn how to write her own name. She said you were one of the few people who saw her as human instead of a case file, and you've been watching me for 2 years. I came to Chateau Noir the first time because a business contact recommended it. You were my server. I recognized your name from Sarah's stories. Victoria met his eyes. I kept coming back because I wanted to understand what kind of person carries that much guilt over something that wasn't their fault. So this is about fixing me. David's right, no. Victoria leaned forward. This is about recognizing that you have a rare ability to see people clearly, to understand that every decision affects real lives. I need that perspective, Marcus. My company needs it. And yes, maybe I need it personally too, because watching you take responsibility for Sarah's pain reminded me that I'd spent 15 years avoiding responsibility for the pain I've caused. We need to tell David the truth. Marcus pulled out his phone. All of it. Before he poisons the whole program with conspiracy theories. I'll arrange a meeting. Victoria's business voice returned. Tomorrow, we'll bring in a neutral mediator. Lay everything out in the open. If David still wants to walk away after that, at least it'll be based on facts instead of suspicion. The meeting happened Monday afternoon in a small conference room with a mediator from the Chicago Dispute Resolution Center. David brought Ryan, Frank, and Jack as witnesses. Victoria brought nothing but the truth. She told them about Sarah Chen, about the scholarship fund, about recognizing Marcus at Chateau Noir and watching him work for 2 years before Friday night forced her hand, about the guilt she carried for abandoning her best friend when she needed help most. So we're your redemption project. David's voice was flat. You get to feel better about yourself, and we get to be grateful. You get to decide if you want 6 months of training and a real shot at employment. Victoria didn't flinch. My motivations aren't pure. I'm not going to pretend they are. But the program exists. The money's allocated. 340 people have enrollment packets waiting. Whether you trust my intentions doesn't change those facts. How do we know you won't pull funding halfway through? Frank's anger simmered just below the surface. You pulled out of Lakewood when the numbers stopped looking good. What happens when this gets expensive or inconvenient? Then Marcus vetoes it. Victoria gestured toward him. I've given him authority to review all major decisions affecting worker welfare. He can demand additional funding, require program modifications, flag concerns directly to the board. You don't have to trust me. Trust him. David looked at Marcus with sharp calculation. You really have that kind of power? Partnership authority. Marcus chose his words carefully. I can't unilaterally stop her, but nothing moves forward without my agreement. If she tries to cut to the program, I'll fight it. And if you lose that fight, then I quit, and you'll know the whole thing was fake. Marcus held David's gaze. But I don't think that's going to happen. I've spent 2 weeks watching her change how she evaluates investments. She's learning. It's not perfect, but it's real. The mediator spoke up. David, what would it take for you to believe this program is legitimate? Independent oversight. David's answer came quick. Worker representation. Not just Marcus, actual participants who can verify the training as quality, the job placements are real, the money flows where it's supposed to. Done. Victoria pulled out her phone and started typing. Worker Advisory Board with full transparency into program operations. You'll chair it. Quarterly audits by third-party assessors. Public reporting on outcomes. Anything else? David exchanged looks with Ryan, Frank, and Jack. Finally, he nodded. We'll try it. But the first sign this is bullshit, we go public. Chicago Tribune, local news, social media. Everyone will know Crosspoint Ventures used us for PR. Fair. Victoria stood and extended her hand. I'd expect nothing less. 3 weeks later, the Workforce Development Program launched at a conference center downtown. 340 former Lakewood employees filled the room, nervous and hopeful in equal measure. Media attended, Chicago Tribune, local TV stations, a reporter from Bloomberg who'd heard about the unusual corporate responsibility initiative. Victoria gave a speech about business obligations to communities. Marcus introduced program details, 6 training tracks, monthly stipends, mental health support, job placement partnerships. Ryan Mitchell testified about already being accepted into a solar energy certification program. The applause felt genuine. That evening, Victoria's board called an emergency meeting. Marcus wasn't invited, but Victoria texted him updates from inside the conference room. Richard Kensington, the lead investor, was demanding the program be canceled. $8.2 million with no return on investment. Shareholders furious. The CFO presented projections showing the program would reduce annual returns by 3.2%. They're voting to shut it down. Victoria's text came through at 8:15. 7-2 against me. I have 72 hours to comply, or they remove me as CEO. Marcus called her immediately. Fight them. With what? They have the votes. Find a way to prove the program has business value. Marcus paced his apartment while Sophie slept in the next room. Make it about more than charity. How? Use me. Use the participants. Show investors this isn't just good ethics, it's good business. Victoria went silent for a long moment. Then, meet me at my office. Bring ideas. They spent the next 2 days building a case. Marcus reached out to David, Ryan, Frank, Jack, and 50 other program participants. Asked them to document their progress, their stories, the tangible ways the program was changing their lives. Victoria worked her network, calling venture capital contacts, searching for precedent. Wednesday afternoon, they discovered 3 major investment firms experimenting with similar workforce development models. ESG investing, environmental, social, and governance criteria, was becoming a selling point for institutional investors. Pension funds wanted portfolios that did social good alongside generating returns. Victoria scheduled a press conference for Friday, invited business media alongside local news. Marcus helped 50 program participants prepare to speak about their experiences, Ryan's acceptance into solar certification, Jack's wife getting her medications through the program's health benefits, Carlos's daughter re-enrolling at community college with program-provided tuition assistance. The media coverage went viral. Video clips of Frank Donovan, the man who'd pulled a knife at Chateau Noir 3 weeks ago, tearfully describing how the program gave him hope again. Carlos talking about his daughter's second chance. Jimmy explaining that for the first time in 10 months, he didn't have to lie about where he was going every morning. By Friday evening, Victoria had calls from 4 venture capital firms wanting to license the program model. Projected revenue, $12 million over 3 years, more than covering the $8 million investment. She walked into Saturday's emergency board meeting with new numbers. The room was tense, Richard Kensington's expression suggesting he'd rather be anywhere else. Victoria presented for 20 minutes ESG investment trends, licensing opportunities, the positive media coverage that had already increased Crosspoint Ventures' profile. The board voted again, 6-3 in favor of continuing the program. Richard Kensington abstained, which everyone understood as reluctant acceptance. Victoria kept her CEO position by the slimmest margin possible, but David Torres hadn't enrolled in the program. Marcus discovered this Monday morning when he reviewed participant lists. David's name was missing. He called him immediately. I'm working with a labor attorney. David's voice carried an edge Marcus hadn't heard before. Filing a class action lawsuit against Crosspoint Ventures. For what? Conscience washing, using us to clean up their reputation without addressing the actual harm they caused. Victoria could have saved Lakewood if she'd accepted lower profit margins. Instead, she shut it down, then created this program to make herself look good. The program is real. Marcus felt frustration rising. People are getting trained, finding jobs. Are they? David challenged. Or are they performing gratitude for cameras while you and Victoria get to feel like heroes? Show me the actual job placements. Show me people working in their new careers, not just enrolled in training, actually employed. The program's only been running 3 weeks. Marcus tried to stay calm. Nobody's completed certification yet. Exactly. David's laugh was bitter. So we don't actually know if any of this works. We just have Victoria's promises and we've already seen what those are worth. He hung up before Marcus could respond. The Chicago Sun-Times ran David's story the next morning. Billionaire's Redemption Program. Real help or publicity stunt? The article raised legitimate questions about timing, motivations, and measurable outcomes. Quoted David extensively about CrossPoint Ventures' ability to have prevented the Lakewood closure entirely. Other participants started questioning the program. 10 dropped out the first day after the article published. 20 more by the end of the week. The media narrative shifted from feel-good story to potential scandal. Victoria scheduled a meeting with David for the following Monday, brought in the same mediator from before. Marcus attended, along with Ryan, Frank, and Jack, who'd remained enrolled despite David's allegations. Small conference room, no press, no lawyers. David brought financial analysis showing CrossPoint Ventures could have saved Lakewood with profit margins of 8% instead of 15%. The numbers were solid. The accusation landed heavy. You chose money over people. David's voice was steady now, past anger into something colder. This program is guilt money. Doesn't change what you did. Victoria sat quietly for a long moment. Then, you're right. Everyone stopped. You're right. I could have saved Lakewood. It would have meant smaller returns, 8% instead of 15%. I chose the money. Victoria's voice didn't waver. I made a decision that prioritized profit over 340 families. That was wrong. David's expression shifted, caught off guard. So this whole program is fake. No, it's penance, and it's change. Victoria pulled out documents she'd brought. I can't undo Lakewood, but I can make sure it doesn't happen again. She showed him the new CrossPoint Ventures policy, community impact assessments required before any major divestment decision. Going forward, the company had to evaluate worker impact, explore alternatives to closure, provide 6-month warnings, and fund retraining if closure was unavoidable. Words on paper. David's skepticism remained. You'll ignore it when real money's at stake. That's why Marcus has veto authority. The board approved it Friday. Victoria's voice carried weight now. He can stop any decision that violates our community impact commitments. This policy isn't optional. It's binding. Marcus hadn't known the board approved this. He looked at Victoria, seeing determination in her expression. I told you I don't tolerate mistakes. Her eyes met his. That includes my own. This policy ensures I can't make the Lakewood mistake again. The mediator leaned forward. David, what would make you believe this is genuine? I want worker representation on the board. David's demand was clear. Real seats, real voting power. Not advisory, actual authority to approve or reject major decisions. I'll create 3 board seats for worker representatives. Victoria didn't hesitate. Elections held annually by all CrossPoint Ventures employees and program participants. You'll be nominated for the first seat if you want it. David stared at her, searching for the trap. Why would you give up that much control? Because you're right. I've been making decisions that affect lives I never see. That needs to change. The room stayed silent for a long moment. Then David nodded slowly. I'll withdraw the lawsuit, enroll in the program, but I'm watching everything. I wouldn't want it any other way. Victoria's small smile carried relief. Ryan, Frank, and Jack relaxed visibly, but Marcus noticed Frank staying quiet, hands trembling slightly, eyes focused on something no one else could see. After the meeting, Marcus pulled Frank aside. You okay? Fine. Frank's voice was too flat, too controlled. You don't look fine, just tired. Frank pulled away. Need to get home. Marcus watched him go with a bad feeling crawling up his spine. He'd seen that look before, on people who'd made decisions they hadn't shared yet. 3 days later, Ryan called Marcus at 6 in the morning, voice panicked. It's Frank. He's on the roof of his building. Says he's going to jump. Police are there, but he won't talk to anyone. Marcus was moving before Ryan finished talking. I'm coming. What address? The building was in Pilsen, 8 stories of weathered brick. Police had cordoned off the street. Crisis negotiator already on scene. Marcus showed his old badge, technically expired, but the sergeant on duty recognized him. Detective Reed. The sergeant's face showed relief mixed with confusion. Thought you left the force. I did. Marcus looked up at the roof where Frank was visible. a small figure against the morning sky. But I know Frank. Let me try. The sergeant hesitated, then nodded. 5 minutes. If you can't get through, we're sending tactical. Marcus climbed the stairs slowly, hearing the current negotiator's voice through the roof access door. She was good, using all the right techniques, building rapport, creating space. But Frank wasn't responding. Marcus stepped onto the roof. Frank stood maybe 15 feet from the edge, close enough to be dangerous, far enough to suggest he hadn't fully committed. The negotiator looked at Marcus with a question in her eyes. He nodded, and she stepped back. Frank. Marcus kept his voice calm, hands visible. I'm coming over to talk, the waiter cop. Frank's laugh came out broken. Here to save the day again? I'm here to listen. Marcus moved slowly, stopping 10 feet away, sat down on the rooftop gravel like he had all the time in the world. Nothing to listen to. Frank's voice was hollow. I'm done. The program, the training, all of it. It's bullshit. I'm 48 years old. Nobody's hiring a middle-aged factory worker who's been unemployed for 10 months. My daughter won't return my calls. My wife left last month. I'm just dead weight. Tell me about Emma. Marcus kept his tone gentle. Your daughter. Why, so you can say she'd want me to live? Frank's body swayed slightly. She doesn't care. She's better off without me dragging her down. Did she say that? She doesn't have to. I see it in her face when I video call. Disappointment, shame. Her father's supposed to be someone she can be proud of. I have a daughter, Sophie, 7 years old. Marcus felt the truth of it in his chest. Every single day I wonder if I'm failing her. If I'm enough. If she'll grow up and realize her dad was just a waiter pretending to be something more. Frank turned slightly, listening despite himself. 3 years ago, I failed at the job I was actually good at. Marcus kept talking, using the same skills that had saved 47 lives before Sarah Chen. Someone got hurt because I wasn't good enough. I walked away from everything, told myself I was protecting people by not trying. But you know what that was? Cowardice. Frank's shoulders dropped a fraction. Real courage isn't being perfect. Marcus stood slowly, moving a step closer. It's trying again after you fail. It's showing your daughter that mistakes don't define you. How you respond to them does. Emma doesn't need a perfect father. She needs one who doesn't give up. I'm so tired. Frank's voice cracked. So tired of pretending, of fighting, of waking up every morning wondering why I'm still here. I know. Marcus took another small step. I'm tired too. But our daughters need us. Not perfect versions of us. Just us. Still trying. Still here. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the sound of traffic below and the distant hum of the city waking up. Frank's breathing was ragged, his body trembling. The thing about hitting bottom is that's where you find out who you really are. Marcus's voice dropped lower, more intimate. You're not the job you lost. You're not the marriage that ended. You're the father who worked 20 years to give his daughter a chance at college. You're the man who came to Chateau Noir not to hurt anyone, but to be heard. That person is worth saving. I don't know how to keep going. Frank's words came out broken. One day at a time, 1 hour, 1 minute. Marcus extended his hand, and right now, in this minute, you step back from that edge and let people help you. Frank stood frozen for what felt like an eternity. Then his knees buckled, and he collapsed onto the roof, sobbing. Marcus moved forward quickly, sitting beside him, one hand on his shoulder while Frank broke apart. Police and paramedics rushed in. Frank was taken to the hospital on a psychiatric hold. Marcus rode in the ambulance, stayed through intake, called Victoria to let her know what happened. She arrived at the hospital 2 hours later with her lawyer and her checkbook, arranged for Frank to be transferred to a private facility specializing in depression and crisis intervention, covered all costs, set up ongoing therapy. Didn't make it about PR or gratitude, just did it. Marcus watched her handle everything with quiet efficiency, and something shifted in how he saw her. This wasn't the Ice Queen. This was someone trying to fix damage she'd caused, one person at a time. 6 months after the program launched, Marcus reviewed outcomes. 312 participants had completed training. 287 had found employment. Average salary $52,000, 18% higher than their Lakewood wages. Ryan Mitchell was installing solar panels and had reconciled with his ex-wife. Jack Henderson managed a logistics team at Amazon, and his wife's medical bills were covered by insurance. Carlos's daughter was back in school, pre-med track at community college. Frank Donovan had completed intensive therapy and enrolled in a counseling certification program. He'd reconnected with Emma, who visited him every Sunday. He worked in part-time at a community center helping domestic violence survivors. Sarah Chen's Community Center, as it turned out. The circle closing in unexpected ways. David Torres chaired the worker advisory board and held a board seat at Crosspoint Ventures. He pushed back on every questionable decision, demanded transparency, kept Victoria honest. Their relationship was professional and occasionally combative, but built on mutual respect. Marcus had been Community Impact Director for 6 months. The work was harder than being a waiter, the hours longer, the stakes higher, but it felt like purpose instead of hiding. He'd flagged concerns on 8 investments, forced 3 to be restructured, walked away from 2 that couldn't meet ethical standards. Victoria fought him on some decisions, agreed with others, but never once dismissed him. Late Friday evening, Marcus was finishing paperwork when Victoria appeared in his office doorway. "Still here? Could ask you the same thing." Marcus looked up from quarterly reports. "I'm always here." Victoria leaned against the doorframe. "You have a daughter to get home to. Sophie's at a sleepover. I've got time." Victoria moved into his office, settling into the chair across from his desk. "I wanted to thank you for Frank. The police told me you talked him down. Just did what I was trained to do." Marcus set down his pen. "You almost didn't. You were scared you'd fail again." Terrified, Marcus met her sighs. "But I couldn't let fear stop me. That's what I admire about you." Victoria's voice went quiet. "You feel the fear, and you do it anyway." The silence between them felt different now, weighted with 6 months of working together, arguing, compromising, learning each other's edges and boundaries. "I've been thinking about opening a second program." Victoria shifted in her chair. "For communities affected by our other investments. Would you run it? That's a lot of responsibility." Marcus studied her face in the dim office light. "You've earned it, and I trust you." The words hung between them, meaning more than just professional confidence. Marcus realized they'd crossed from colleagues into something else over the past 6 months. Something neither had named yet, but both felt. Victoria. The way he said her name made her look up. "Maybe we should—" His phone buzzed before he could finish. Sophie texting a goodnight selfie with her friends, all of them grinning at the camera. Victoria smiled at the photo. "She looks happy." "She is." Marcus's voice softened. "Asked me the other day if I was happy too." "What did you tell her?" "That I think I am, for the first time in 3 years." Their eyes met, and Victoria's expression shifted into something vulnerable. "Maybe we should get dinner sometime. Not business. Just us. I know a good restaurant." Marcus felt himself smiling. Best service in Chicago. Victoria laughed, a real laugh, not the polished CEO version. "Chateau Noir? Where else?" 3 months later, they returned to Chateau Noir with David, Ryan, Frank, and Jack. A celebration of the program's 9-month mark, now officially recognized by the city of Chicago as a model for corporate community investment. Paul Romano greeted Marcus warmly, no longer seeing just a former waiter, but someone who'd built something meaningful. They sat at table 14, Victoria's old spot, and ordered food Marcus no longer had to serve. "I still don't always agree with you." David raised his glass. "But you've earned my respect." "Both of you," Victoria nodded. "That means more than you know." Frank spoke quietly. 9 months ago, I wanted to hurt you. Now I'm sitting here having dinner, talking about my daughter's college applications. Life's strange. Strange isn't the word. Ryan smiled. Miraculous, maybe. 6 months ago, I was delivering DoorDash at midnight. Now I'm installing solar panels and my ex-wife is talking about reconciliation. Jack added his glass to the toast. My wife got her medication. First time in a year, she's not in constant pain. That's worth celebrating. Life is what we make it. Victoria's voice carried the weight of 9 months spent learning this lesson. We can't change the past, but we can build something better from the pieces. After dinner, Marcus walked Victoria to her car. The parking garage echoed with city sounds. the November air carrying memories of that first Friday night when everything changed. You saved my life. Victoria turned to face him in the shadows between concrete pillars. Not physically, but you saved me from becoming someone I would have hated. You saved mine too. Marcus stepped closer, close enough to see the reflection of garage lights in her eyes. Gave me a reason to stop hiding, to trust myself again. What happens now? Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. We keep working, keep trying, keep failing sometimes and succeeding sometimes. Marcus reached for her hand. And maybe we see where this goes. If you're willing, I'm willing. Victoria's smile was genuine, warm, everything the Ice Queen reputation said she couldn't be. They kissed in the parking garage where 9 months ago she'd been just another customer and he'd been invisible. Now they were partners, in business, in purpose, in the careful construction of something neither could fully name yet, but both wanted to build. The city stretched out beyond the garage entrance, Chicago settling into its late-night rhythm. Somewhere out there, 312 people were living different lives because of choices made in a moment of crisis. David was preparing for his first board meeting as worker representative. Frank was counseling men who'd hit the same bottom he had. Ryan was teaching solar installation to the next round of program participants. Jack was writing a training manual that would help other supervisors see their workers as human beings. And Victoria Cross was no longer the Ice Queen standing alone in corner restaurants. She was standing here, hand in Marcus's, building a future that honored the past's pain while refusing to be defined by it. Marcus's phone buzzes. Sophie texting from her sleepover. Love you, Dad. Is Miss Victoria coming to my soccer game Saturday? He showed Victoria the message. She laughed, typed back herself. Wouldn't miss it. 1 year from that first Friday night, when Marcus tucked Sophie into bed, her drawings will show 4 people. A family built not from blood, but from choice, from showing up, from refusing to let failure be the final word. The Community Impact Fund will have grown to $50 million. Crosspoint Ventures will have 3 worker representatives on the board. David Torres will be writing a book. Frank Donovan will have his counseling license. And Marcus Reed will be VP of Community Relations, no longer hiding from his abilities, but using them. But that's tomorrow's story. Tonight in this parking garage, with Victoria's hand in his and the city lights painting everything in shades of possibility. Marcus feels something he hasn't felt in 3 years. He feels ready for whatever comes next.